Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 190 of the J Situation Podcast. I'm recording this on December 5th, 2023. How are all you wonderful folks doing on this fine fall day? Yeah, or is it a winter day? Yeah, I guess it depends where you are, doesn't it? Yeah. How on earth is it already December? That's wild, dude. It's Christmas tree time. You got to find a good one too. Don't sleep on that. You got to go get one now if you haven't, right? You're basically like first week of December, you're burning daylight. You got to go now. You don't want them to be picked clean. So moving past Thanksgiving, we all still do have so much to be thankful for. I know I am very thankful for all of you listening, all of your support, and for the incredible year we've had. There's so many blessings. And speaking of blessings, PEW Science Members all blessed us with the capability to test the SilencerCo Velos on multiple platforms. And first up was the 556 Mark 18 test. We published that test data and analysis last week. And on today's episode, we're going to speak technically about that article for you folks. So that should be cool. And if we have time, I also want to speak briefly with you about some Knights Armament silencer testing that we're going to be doing and some Knights Armament upper receiver groups that I think we might throw into the mix too. It might be cool. Okay, so we'll go into that if we have time after the technical discussion. And before I forget, if you are listening on YouTube right now, because you guys know you can do that, you might not know this, but there are timestamps in the video description, just like there are on podcast providers and stuff. So I'm about to read some ads for our wonderful sponsors. If you would like to skip directly to the content of the podcast, you can click on the timestamps. Not that you would ever do such a thing because you love the sponsors so much, but I'm just saying if you want to skip, you can, and that's why they're there. Okay, so you can go back or go forward or wherever you would like. Okay, they're there for you. Okay. With all that being said, let me tell you quickly about some of the companies who make this podcast possible. The first one is Legion Athletics. That's right, because nothing you do, exercise, sports, really anything in life is worth doing without consistency. You have to do it all the time if you want to be good at it, right? Legion Athletics can help with that. They got whey protein, pre-workout, post-workout. They don't have everything you need, but they got a lot of it. And so you can visit legionathletics.com. There's a link in the show notes. Code word PEWScience to save 20% off your first order. And if you keep using that code, you get double loyalty points. And it ends up netting you a 10% off of everything you buy going forward after that. So it's pretty cool. Code word PEW Science. Get strong. It's important. And you know what? Before this podcast, I took a half a scoop of the Legion Pulse, which is the pre-workout. Just a little bit of focusing after the long work day I had today. And that's I like the blood orange flavor. That's my new favorite flavor of that. And actually, Legion, because they're a sponsor, they sent me something called. It's something you take during your workout. I have been taking this thing called Performance Surge, which kind of like gives you some extra stuff. But they sent me something called Pump Surge. I just took a little bit of that. It's supposed to increase blood flow. Guess we'll find out what happens. Oh yeah. This episode is also brought to you by Top Gun Range Houston. That's right. If you're in the Houston area, even if you're just visiting, they're worth checking out. In addition to having a 15-lane indoor range, they have the largest firearm rental fleet in the entire state of Texas. You can rent pistols and rifles and shotguns, and that's right, you guessed it, machine guns, and now you can even rent silencers, which is a really big deal. And because they're a sponsor of this podcast, and they're on PewScience.com, and they're also a corporate member of PEW Science. They're letting you rent the silencers we've tested. So if you want to see how the data shakes out in real life, go shoot them with there in the range. Isn't that crazy? It's awesome. Go check out their rental inventory at TopGunRange.com. You can also find them on Instagram at TopGunRange. It's awesome. It is. Also, this episode is brought to you by Heat High-End Armament Technologies. It's a dealer of exactly that, high-end arms and accessories. They've been around for a very long time. Whether you're looking for night vision thermal optics, infrared sighting systems, extremely rare and awesome machine guns, things like that, Robert and his crew are going to help you find it. You can go to highendarms.com, Instagram at highendarms, and even Facebook page, which is, you guessed it, High End Arms. Okay, I hope they can help you out if you need it. Okay, tell them Jay sent you. Also, this episode is brought to you by Silencer Shop, the largest distributor of silencers in the world. Isn't that wild? You can use their kiosk, do your fingerprints and photos electronically, and in turn, you cut down on errors. You simplify your silencer purchasing process. You got a money-back guarantee. It's pretty good. No transfer fees. No paperwork errors. It's just you and your silencer with no drama. It truly is silencer ownership simplified. It is. And most importantly, this episode, the entire podcast, and everything you hear me say ever is brought to you by the PEW Science Laboratory. I'm the technical director of the lab, and in the interest of public education, the lab sponsors this podcast and runs a public research effort which continues to push the silencer industry forward one test at a time. Please visit pewscience.com for the suppression rating. It is the simplest and most accurate hearing-safe rating for your suppressed small arms, based on true human inner ear response of the entire gunshot from before combustion takes place all the way into all the combustion is gone, from real weapon systems with real silencers with a real person shooting it in the free field. Okay, it's real. It's all real. It's awesome. And PEW Science is the home of the Silencer Sound Standard 7 sections, the most in-depth and accurate silencer data and analysis in the entire universe. And it's available to the public 24/7. That's right. Check it all out on pewscience.com. And you can support this podcast, PEW Science, all the public testing that we do, by joining with a membership at pewscience.com. That is really great. Really helps a lot. There's also a donate feature on the review page of the podcast page if you're not interested in doing a recurring thing, which is fine. Every little bit helps, guys. But you know what? If you're not interested in spending money, which I totally understand in this economy, something that's free, doesn't cost you anything, spread the word. Give this podcast a good rating on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and let folks know that silencers and guns are awesome. Normalize the use of suppressed small arms. It will be great. So I have 2 topics prepared. I don't know if we'll have time for both, but I think we will. Topic 1, Sound Signature Review 6134, the SilencerCo Velos LBP on the 5.56 Mark 18. We talked about this in an introductory discussion last time. Today we're going to talk about the technical discussion. Okay, this was a long-awaited white paper. We published it last week, and big thanks to PEW Science Members for making it possible. We're gonna nerd out today, aren't we? I'm gonna get all up in this silencer. Well, in the analysis. And topic 2, if we have time, sometimes it takes a village. You know, Knight's armament silencer system testing is in the works, and there's actually been contributions from several folks. The KAC 5.56 QDC-CRS PRT and the 5.56 QDC MCQ-PRT, the pressure reducing technology silencers from Knight's, the 5.56 versions. Those were loaned by a PEW Science member. Okay, we're thinking about doing Mark 18 and M4 testing on those, okay, like we've been doing with a lot of these silencers, but also, guess what else PEW Science members loaned? The SR-15 Carbine MOD 2, 14.5 upper, and the SR-15 CQB MOD 2, which is 11.5 upper. Isn't that crazy? Oh, and a member loaned a MAMS brake. You know, so there's all this stuff. So let's talk about, in topic 2, we're going to talk about what that even means. And should we do it? And should we even add more silencers? Who knows? Right? It's crazy. It could be a very expensive member test program, but one for the ages, potentially, depending on how we run it. So topic 1, at a time of 8 minutes and 53 seconds. Boom. Sorry that intro was a little bit long, guys, but we had a lot to say, and it was very important, actually. Very important. So topic 1, Sound Signature Review 6134. Yeah, so the SilencerCo Velos LBP on the 5.56 Mark 18. We talked about it last week. In the introductory discussion, we published the research, and you all had ample time to digest it. You had an entire week, and now we'll have the technical discussion. Very good. And this was a long time coming. I really do want to thank all of you for your patience. I will say it was cool to test this silencer. I again want to thank the PEW Science member, again, who loaned it for testing. We also tested on the 14.5-inch mid-length gas M4A1. That data will come as well, just not this second, okay? So there is something we did with this test that was a little less than optimal that I need to speak with you about. It's fine, and it's consistent with the pedigree, but it did bother me a little bit. Just to explain this, the silencer ships with two mounts, right? It ships with a direct thread MAD mount, and which is the mount that this silencer was tested with in the article, and the same type of mount that the Saker 556 from SilencerCo was tested with back when we tested that silencer. So same. But the silencer also comes with an ASR brake mount. Okay? That's right. So as you can imagine, the results could be different, couldn't they? With that mount, yes. And we did think about this prior to testing. We thought about it consciously. That there was consideration for it. So when changing the mounts on the silencer, on this particular version, the test sample that we have, there was a thread issue. Okay, we aren't 100% sure. We suspect that the threads were messed up from the factory, maybe, or we don't necessarily think it was from the user who loaned it to us because we spoke with them and they had no knowledge of that at all. We spoke with them about it. We had a lot of trouble changing the mounts to the point to even thread them back once we took them off and threaded back on. To even do that, we had to use a long handle wrench in a vise. Or rather, the silencer was in the vise and a long handle wrench to get enough torque to actually thread it on. The threads were all, the threads on the sample are all messed up. It wasn't normal. And so during the test matrix, we left the direct thread mount on and we only tested with the direct thread mount. Okay. We figured it was okay because we were maintaining consistency with the Saker test. Okay. In our mind, it was the most apples to apples way to compare an old generation SilencerCo silencer to the new generation, because that's the data that's been published for years now on the website. And there was another factor too. The other factor was that the Saker 556, originally, and we still have that in inventory, funny enough, it actually had two mounts as well, but its other mount was not a brake. It was the three-prong flash hider. Remember the flash hider with the three prongs that were different lengths? Yeah, that's what it had. And so this Velos, its two mounts were the direct thread and then the brake, which is not a flash hider. So testing those two, like if we had tested for example, the flash hider with the Saker a while back and then the brake with the Velos right now, that would not have been apples to apples at all. Okay. So again, this being a member test, we figured, okay, let's give folks what we think is probably the conservative worst case, given all the variables I just described. Okay, direct thread that comes with a silencer, seems smart. It's the answer we're going to do. We'll just do that. So we did. Okay, and that's it. And that's the reason. That's the whole shebang. Now, and I'm getting to why I'm discussing this with you in such detail, because it's important. So in all of the feedback we received after we published this article, there were two individuals, out of all the feedback, and we got, guys, we have thousands of people talk to us about this stuff. There are two individuals who commented on a differential they noticed. Two. The first is another manufacturer, to remain nameless. I'm not going to talk about who they are. He told me, in his experience, he thought the Velos was quieter on the Mark 18 than compared to a different silencer that we've tested. I asked him which mount he used. He told me the mount it came with, the ASR brake. I said, well, hey, man, it comes with two mounts. Don't tell me you use the mount it came with. It comes with two mounts. And he didn't say anything. So it's not just the ASR. So that's one data point. And I took that. And to be clear, I also explained to that individual some other factors he might not be considering as well. It gets way more complicated than that. But I just wanted to tell you, we did receive that feedback. I said, okay. Feedback noted. Thank you for sharing your feedback. He shared a lot of other details too. I'm not going to go into them, but let me just say noted, but I understand why he gave that. The second individual and the second data point came from SilencerCo themselves. I actually spoke with my SilencerCo contact about this article, just, unrelated to this happening. Just I spoke with him about the fact that it did happen after the fact, and he told me, and unprompted, I didn't even ask him about the amount or anything, didn't talk to him about that. He told me unprompted that he thought that the silencer performs better with the ASR brake. I was like, that's interesting. He then asked me why I tested it with the direct thread mount. And I told him exactly what I just told all of you, because that's why. So here we are. Okay, that's where we are right now. I wanted to preface the technical discussion with that background so you can understand with a hub-capable silencer, you can change performance of the system, particularly when you move from direct thread to a brake mount, for example, okay? But, and this is very important, do not miss this part, I don't want you guys to think that always happens, okay? I don't want you to start worrying about this like the sky's falling. What I don't want you to think is that if you take any silencer that was tested with direct thread and add a brake, you're going to get some added performance thing and make it quieter. I don't want you to think that's going to happen. Because can it happen sometimes? Yes. Does it happen all the time? Absolutely not. And guess what? It's actually super complicated. But don't worry. I'm going to help you understand it. Okay, so... But before I even get into the results and get into the data, I want to talk about the Velos physically, and I want to tell you about what it actually does, what's inside, and why it is likely that the suppression rating would change with the mount on this particular silencer, okay? And potentially, I want to talk about some other stuff that could change with the mount as well, okay? Okay. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to give some examples of some other high flow rate silencers and why they may or may not change behaviors with different mounts. I think this is important. I'm going to go into it and then we'll talk numbers, okay? But before I talk about the math, but before I talk about the measured data and the math and everything, the analysis and the combustion characteristics, I want to talk about these physical characteristics of the silencer. I think it's extremely important for you to understand it. Before we move on, okay? Okay. So, right off the bat, and where is it? I got 100 silencers on my desk right now. One second. Oh, it's in the back. Okay, yeah. Okay, it's right in front of me. Very good. Right off the bat, I want to tell you, this thing it's a very high performance silencer. No question. And the construction is intelligent. It's interesting. I estimate, without having any data or information from anyone about this, because remember, I've barely talked to SilencerCo about this. SilencerCo didn't even know we were doing this test. Okay, so without knowing much, just from what I see, just from my knowledge of looking at the silencer, it is probably one of the most durable 5.56 silencers you can buy right now. Probably one of the most. And it's not only due to the construction materials, but it's the geometry of the blast baffle and the way it vents too. I think SilencerCo probably did a good job with the silencer in many ways. We obviously see from the article that they did. That is my subjective opinion, that I think they did a good job with the silencer in many ways. Okay, that's a subjective opinion, but it is true that I think that the silencer has a hub interface in the back, universal back end, okay? In the blast chamber, in the first expansion chamber, we call that the blast chamber, you have an angle of incidence on the blast baffle that is favorable for less erosion, okay? It's sort of like the Hoplon blast baffle in their Saker system, but not. Okay, it's smart the way they shaped it. There's a vent array that is circumferential around the blast baffle. Okay, so what does that mean? The blast baffle's ported around its outer circumference. Okay, but also there's an annular spiral cavity in the silencer. Okay, there's an annular spiral cavity in the silencer, and that annulus is accessed at the outer diameter of the baffle, forward of that leading geometry. So there's actually 2 vent arrays here. So if you go in further into the blast chamber cavity, or around the furthest forward edge that you can see of that blast baffle, there you're venting to annular space with a spiral cavity, or goes around the outside. So I want you to hold that thought. Okay, I want you to hold that thought. We're talking about mount, right? We're talking about mount. So you have this Velos blast baffle in your mind now, right? You can picture shock reflections off of the blast baffle and the walls, right? Now think about an OSS silencer or a Huxworks rifle silencer, right? Either an HXQD Helix flow-through or a Flow Series flow-through, right? Excuse me. Just so you know, and probably very few of you know this, also look at a CAT surge bypass silencer. Flow-through from Hux, surge bypass from CAT, they both have vents on the blast chamber walls. Okay, the Velos does not in that way. It's actually much further forward. It's a much smaller orifice, and it's much further forward. So what does that mean? It means that annular venting happens a little bit differently. Have we quantified this exact difference? No, we have not. Have we tested the Velos with the ASR brake? No, we have not. But what would happen if the brake induced reflection to the walls of the blast chamber in the Velos? It's probably a little bit different than what would happen in an OSS silencer or a CAT silencer, right? Yeah. It can be subtle. But timing can also be everything, and depending on the baffle stack in the silencer, in the case of the Velos, which actually does use conventional baffles in addition to its spiral annulus, that flow rate is going to be a little different in late time too. So when you consider this, there are early time flow rate things happening in the Velos that I think are probably influenced by muzzle device. And we have 2 anecdotal reports for some people who have time behind the silencer that tells us that this hypothesis it's potentially correct. Again, I have no data to show me that, but I'm not dismissing their statements, okay? I'm not dismissing their statements. Though I do urge you to take both statements with a huge grain of salt, given that we have many more statements corroborating it all. So but I'm giving everyone equal benefit of the doubt, right? But I'm just telling you what could possibly affect the silencer. I just want you guys to keep this in mind. So, do I know if the early time flow rate changes negatively with the ASR brake to then change the shooter's year risk? No, I don't know that. Now, does the ASR brake add length and weight to the system? Well, of course it does. A lot of it, actually. Is the direct thread mount consistent with what was previously tested with SilencerCo, and does it come with the silencer? Yes. Okay. So again, here we are. And so, I do apologize for a little bit of unknowns here, but the good thing is that most likely, guys, the suppression rating you see in this article, it's probably a lower bound for the silencer on the Mark 18. Probably. Now, it may potentially get better with whatever mount you choose to use with it, but that remains to be seen. Okay? You see how you can't test every silencer with every mount, guys. What we try to do is we try to test the silencers with the mounts they come with. And if it comes with two, we usually test with the most simple mount, or we default to something that is similar so we can get more apples to apples. And, we have that dang... I remember when we tested that Saker silencer back several years ago, guys. And I remember debating, and I said, you know what? We've been testing stuff to direct thread. I don't think we should do the ASR. I think we should just do direct thread. And we did. Because I was worried. I was like, oh man, well, what if we don't use the ASR on all the silencers, and then the ASR silencer is different, or you know what I mean? So it's like, we'll just do direct thread, and we did, and that was way back when, several years ago. And so I think this is consistent. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But I just wanted to preface all of this discussion before we get into the math with this overall picture of what the physics are doing in the silencer, and just know that just because you put a brake in a silencer doesn't mean it's going to be quieter. Could it have made the Velos a little bit quieter? It may be. But again, the degree to which it would be quieter, I don't know. And just because a couple of people said that, I don't believe it until I test it. So, okay. I do value their opinions, and I do value their feedback, but I don't see it as definitive. Okay, I see testing and analysis as definitive because it's quantitative and I can prove it. Okay, and again, those are two manufacturers, so it's a little cloudy. In my experience, it's opinions from a manufacturer is very cloudy, no matter who it is. Okay, so if you would like, please open the review on the website, 6.134, the SilencerCo Velos LBP. It was published on the 29th of November. That was last week. I am pulling up the member version of the review. If you would like to follow along at home, you can certainly pull up the free version. Okay. I won't leave you behind, I promise. So, starting from the top, at the muzzle, on the standard Mark 18 weapon system, the SilencerCo Velos with the direct thread mount achieves a 28.7 suppression rating. At the shooter's ear, it achieves a suppression rating of 28.1. This results in an overall composite suppression rating of 31.9 on the weapon system. Okay? So, for a very high flow rate silencer, did I mention that? LBP, Velos LBP is low back pressure. It's in the name. For a very high flow rate silencer, this is very good. Very good. The shooter's ear hazard reduction is exceptional for the Mark 18 system. It's just really good, guys. The muzzle suppression rating, being what it is, simultaneously is very good. When was the last time we saw performance almost exactly like this, guys? It was the OSS HXQD 556, the full-size 556 HXQD silencer from Huxworks back in review 654? Gosh, you're going to make me check it. It's got to be right. Yeah. The Saker was 53. The Saker was 53. Yeah, that's wild. The Saker was 53. The HXQD 556 was 54. So that was in October of 2021. Let me pull that up because I know it was. Okay, I have that up too. Yeah, October 7th of 2021 is when that OSS article was published. Okay. It was over 2 years ago. That silencer has 27.5 at both the muzzle and the ear. And this one is 28.7 and 28.1. The Huxworks was 27.5 and 27.5. Extremely close. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting, isn't it? So you may ask yourself, does that mean that these two silencers sound the same? It's a very excellent question. We're going to do a deep dive for members with regard to that, okay? And due to the way that OSS silencers vent, there is most likely a differential, but we'll have to dig into that. Many people are reporting that the Velos sounds better to them. And what does better mean? Remember when we spoke about how low frequency inner ear excitation of the Huxworks flow-through technology it results in what we call a boomy signature? We did member research articles quantifying that, guys. You can search boomy on the member search box to find that research. The Huxworks stuff is flow-through. The Velos from SilencerCo is not flow-through. It is the Velos LBP. Low back pressure is in the name. Fine. And it is low back pressure, as we're going to get into today, but it's not flow-through. I keep seeing people say that. Stop saying it. It's not a flow-through silencer. Flow-through is different. The difference between low back pressure and flow-through is that flow-through can be low back pressure, but low back pressure doesn't need to be flow-through. You guys, it's just not the same thing. All right? The SilencerCo Velos LBP is what we call a hybrid design. It possesses traits of both conventional rifle silencers and high flow rate silencers in a way that balances some of the traits, okay? We put out a research supplement about this too, that supplement 6/124, right? That was fairly recent. That was like 10 articles ago. It's not that long ago. Hybrid designs vary. Okay, they vary. And really, there's stuff from Surefire, CGS, Liberty Precision Machine, CAT, and now here you see one from SilencerCo. The hybrid designs simply suppress differently than a flow-through OSS or a forward flux SIG in certain regimes. And you may find that they just sound better, okay? But not always, and not all of them, okay? Excuse me. So in the case of the Velos, what is it doing? Let's look. Let's look at the best way we know how to look at that. We'll look at the silencer's fingerprint. Okay, that's what we do. Let's do it now. Take a look at Figure 1 in the article. You have Figure 1A and you have Figure 1B. This is an excellent example of why you need to look at the entire time regime, guys. SilencerCo really did you a solid here making this silencer, and PEW Science Members really did you a solid making this review happen, because this addition to the pedigree is so fantastic. Check this out, dude. In Figure 1A, not only are you seeing relatively expedient blowdown, which tells you a lot, you're seeing the bolt carrier group returning to battery pretty dang late in time. Okay, it's not a tell-all indicator, but boy, is that an early indicator right away. It's an early indicator right away that something is going on here, right? It's interesting, right? And when you zoom into the early time fingerprint, you see something you may have expected, right? Given what I told you about the silencer earlier in the talk, right? Look at Figure 1B. Look what when we zoom in on the early time signature of the muzzle blast in the free field. You see a very pronounced positive phase pressure history in early time. Immediate shocks with significant rarefaction, meaning it's going negative in a significant way. What does that mean in plain English? Well, what is happening between around 29.6 milliseconds and 30 milliseconds roughly in that pressure signature? What's happening, guys? It's a pretty big pressure pulse, right? With a lot of gas momentum, right? Quickly. It's happening quickly, right? That's a lot of blast load quickly. And what does that do? It ramps up that momentum accumulation in the free field. And how can you tell? Besides looking at this pressure signature I'm talking to you about, how can you tell? You can look at the impulse. That's right, the gas momentum transfer potential in Figure 2. That's right. Figure 2A and Figure 2B looks an awful lot like an OSS signature here, doesn't it? Right? That's because it's very similar. So why, when looking at these waveforms analytically, would you see a similarity between the early time impulse components of the Velos and the HXQD556? Because, friends, you have venting to annular cavities and distal vents to atmosphere. But if you examine the two silencers closely, in the signatures from the silencers very closely, this one in Article 6134 and the HXQD556 in Article 654, you'll notice they're not completely similar, right? The Huxworth system does move into rarefaction sooner, and the impulse decay happens more expediently. So what does that mean in plain English? What does that mean? It means the gas is moving out of the Huxworth silencer even faster, and it's all venting through the silencer faster physically. Due to wave momentum physics, you can literally see that occur in the free field. Okay? And that, my friends, is the magic of looking at real sound signatures, and you don't even need the suppression rating for that. You don't need it. All you need is measurement, math, and a knowledge of physics. And anyone can reproduce it, and they have anywhere in the world. And now you can too. Isn't that cool? It's awesome, okay? So now you see the Velos is similar to the HXQD556, but different. And now you know exactly why. You know why analytically and experimentally and physically, because you see the physics, you see the analysis, and when you look in the two silencers, you see it plain as day. The Velos traditional baffles of the hybrid design have no way of letting gas out as fast as the OSS, even with the porting array in the blast chamber and the spiral annulus. The Huxworks OSS silencer is just faster, and that is because it's designed to be faster. It's designed to be. And that, my friends, is why they sound different. Oh, snap. Cheat code unlocked. You now know how silencers work. But a lot of PEW Science members already did. And that is what makes this whole thing so cool. Okay? I mean, it's the spiral annulus of the Velos helping. Like, look, let me ask you a question. Does the spiral annulus of the Velos help like the spiral annulus of the Huxworks? Well, yes, but in a different way. Remember, the Huxworks flow through, what does it do? It maintains gas velocity, but lengthens flow path by sending things back and forth. It has multiple overlapping gas paths that move forward and aft in the silencer. Really long. The Velos, in contrast to that, it only slightly lengthens the flow path because it spirals it around the outer wall instead of going back and forth too. Okay? The shortest possible path would just be going straight through. That's like even more primitive, right? So, how do you get more suppression out of the Velos? This is the regular baffles. That's right. Hux doesn't use those. Everything in the Huxworks rifle silencers is intended to maintain velocity, and instead of just instead of causing turbulence like the baffles do in the Velos, in the Huxworks silencers, they maximize the forward turbulence and the heat transfer over a certain time regime, so it just maximizes the efficiency differently. Okay, so that's the difference. In the hybrid design of the Velos, you're combining quick venting to annulus with conventional baffle turbulence, in the Huxworks silencer, you are maintaining flow velocity with early venting, but when turbulence is created in the primary flow, you're shuttling it without stagnation, because you could call the inside of the Huxworks silencer baffles, but it's because any object to obstruct gas flow is a baffle, really, but it's not in the conventional sense of the conventional geometry you see in the Velos. I think if you look at them side by side, you'll see why the gas velocity gradients are so much higher in the Huxworks. You see that physically when you look at it, and then of course you see it in the data as well. So now you got to ask yourself, one second. So now you got to ask yourself, what happens in the free field? Oh my goodness gracious. What happens in the free field? Well, we know. We have the data. Everyone's happy. Now, what happens in enclosed spaces? What happens near adjacent objects? What happens near barriers? What happens near berms? What happens near trees? What happens near buildings, near cars, in your hallway, in your bedroom? Which system has more severe reflections? Is it the Velos? Is it the Liberty Precision Machine? Is it the Surefire? Is it the Cat? Is it the Huxworks? I don't know, man. Without doubt, it's irresponsible to even speculate, really. But we do have some theories. You start to see some of this and we'll talk about that later. I need to give you more background on wave physics and reflection physics. You don't have that yet, but you'll get it. But now that you understand at least the internal gas flow dynamics and what happens immediately in the free field, I want to go back to the article, look at the data again, and I want to talk a little bit more about the impulse. When you look at Figure 2, the impulse in Figure 2, you learn something here about the Velos, and this is actually a part where I will say this. I'm glad we did direct thread. This is one of the reasons I'm really glad we did direct thread. This is actually really good from a pure research perspective because we get to see some pure physics happening here because we have no doubt. I love direct thread a lot because it's like, oh man, it's showing me pure physics. And unless a manufacturer asks me to test with a certain mount, I usually will do a direct thread. You know what I mean? Just because of this, because it's just a little bit of a bonus. So look at Figure 2B. And in a worst case, I'll do like, oh man, can't do direct thread. I'll do a flash hider or something, because it'll let more flow. But the brake can change things a little bit, especially with a silencer like this, like we talked about earlier. So anyway, look at Figure 2B. This is really interesting. Look at Figure 2B. Notice how you get your first round pop, right? And the first round pop is fairly severe. I can tell you that from the analysis. In impulse space, you can actually see the large secondary accumulation, and I even labeled it in the figure so you wouldn't miss it. You can't miss it, but I labeled it so you couldn't. FRP looks a little wild here, right? Okay, fine. I'm not dogging the silencer. I'm just telling you analytically it's interesting. But then what happens? Shot 2 and shot 3, extremely well behaved. Very well behaved, right? But then what happens with shot 4 and shot 5 and shot 6, dude? You start to get runaway momentum, don't you? Interesting, right? More gas impulse, more momentum. And why? Guys, it's the same thing that happened in the OSS review, the OSS test, but more subtle. It's more subtle now. You are losing heat transfer efficiency. This type of system can only hang on so long. You can only do this for so long without multiple stages. You see, but it's interesting, guys. The Velos, and I think I mentioned this on social media somewhere last week. The Velos is actually simple. I actually do admire the absolute simplicity about the whole thing. although there are certain things you could change to make it perform better, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback this publicly. I just don't, that's not what I do. Okay. I don't know that I've ever done that really. I don't like to do that on purpose. Okay. I'm just saying, I do think this is simple, and due to the way it is simple, that's why you're seeing that runaway momentum. The Velos, it's an annulus and a standard stack with distal vents from the spiral and nothing else, dude. If you were to stage the approach here, what would you get? If you were to change some things with different stages, you would get something closer to surge bypass is what you would get, which is actually more complex. Sometimes to deal with complex phenomena, you need to embrace the complexity and tackle it head on. Like, I wouldn't say brute force it, but sometimes you just can't get away with not having something in a system. So, like, sometimes you're like, it's good enough, and you know what? A lot of times it is good enough if that's your goal. But sometimes to address certain performance parameters, you have to do something else. Okay, it's just reality physically. Sometimes you don't want to, or you can't, or whatever, and you don't, and that's fine. But knowing what things do is cool. Knowing what this does is cool. Knowing what this does not do is cool. I'm tricking you into learning, dude. This is literally applied research, guys. This is literally the definition of applied research. So welcome to the fold. Coffee's in the back. Okay. So in the article, isn't that cool how you can, like, just like looking back on the impulse graph, isn't it cool how you can see that you lose efficiency in the shot string due to that? Isn't that wild? It's so cool. And go to article 654 with the HXQD 560. You can see it start to happen too. It happens more subtly, but it's there. It's very cool. Very cool that you see that physical mechanism happening. So in the article, I do mention that the silencer has a really low omega metric, and that's true. And actually, everything I just told you should help you understand that. You probably already inferred that from the discussion. You can certainly look at it and calculate it yourself from the graphs. It's literally there, open source. The alpha may be low too. So the impulse accumulation in the blast chamber, I don't think it's as low as some of these other silencers, maybe just the way the vent array is, which I do find interesting. But it'll be really cool to measure that whenever we grow PEW Science some more and have some time for things like that. Now, I also list some other designs in the article. I think I go pretty verbose actually in the article about it. I list some other designs and what is similar and what is different. You should read that, because I go through very concisely what I have been explaining here on the podcast today in written words that you can reference. Okay, so it would be important for you to read the article if you want to understand this further. Okay, you can always email me too. I'll be happy to answer your questions in email, but please read it first. At least try a little bit. It'd be good. Learn some stuff, I think. Hopefully it's clear. I do hope it's clear. One thing you will see is that the Velos is simply not making the gun function too quickly. It's not making the gun overfunction. And that is one of the reasons the shooter's ear suppression rating is so great. Or one of the symptoms of the suppression rating being so great, because that all kind of goes hand in hand with the weapon system, right? That's in conjunction with its hybrid design, right? Without the hybrid design, just because your gun's not overfunctioning doesn't mean it's gonna be quiet. You gotta have multiple pieces to the puzzle, right? So that brings me to something I need to say. PEW Science members, you get some really good data here in your version of the article, because you see the incredible shooter's ear waveforms that really prove out consistently what we've been showing you the whole time with regard to how this stuff works and why we do all this stuff in the free field, guys. That's really important. It's really cool, because you would not see the stuff you see in the member section of this review if you didn't do it properly. And that's just so great to see. You can look at it, and the way I've labeled the plots for you members, it's good. In all the years of doing this, since we started it, the fact that we're doing it consistently and correctly in the free field, it's paying dividends. Isn't that cool? It's just so great to see. I couldn't be happier with that. 134 articles, and it's all still correct and consistent. It's just so good because you can look at it and be like, oh my, yep, here it is again. Now we can compare it in the free field. So important, dude. Because it's all look at just. Oh, I don't want to steal the members' thunder by talking about all their stuff here on the podcast. You just go look at it. Okay, so you look at this silencer overall. This Velos, I have it in my hand now. It's funny. Some people thought maybe it performed low or something. I was like, oh, really? I don't know. You look at all this in context, and you see that, dang man, it's doing some major work here. I mean, the shooter's ear suppression rating alone, it's doing some major work, and it's not that long. And with the direct thread mount, I have, I'm sitting here next to the RC2 on my desk. It's a little bit shorter than an RC2 with the direct thread mount on it. Just a touch. And it's a simple silencer. And there's actually one thing. Actually, let me back up. Before I talk about the thing I was just going to say, do you guys understand the gravity of high flow rate with more controlled gas momentum out of the front of a silencer? And quantitatively, when you have a shooter's ear suppression rating that is really high, relatively on a weapon, on a semi-auto weapon, or any weapon, and the muzzle suppression rating gets high too, do you understand like the combination of those is really important? Because remember, with regard to perception, a lot of times late time stuff comes into play, and then near barriers and stuff, the muzzle suppression rating becomes important too. If you're in the free field in the middle of nowhere and you shoot a Huxworks Flow 556K and you get, a marginally higher suppression rating, like what is this, 28 something, and then what is the Huxworks, 31? Okay, 20 basically 29 to 31. Okay, a couple points in the free field. Okay, cool. But then what's the muzzle suppression rating deficit? Let me scroll down to the muzzle suppression rating. The Flow 556K is 25.8. Okay, let's see, the Velos 28.7. So okay, 3 points. So you see how you're now over a certain threshold on both muzzle and ear with the Velos, just like you were on the HXQD 556. And the Flow 556K, sure, it's doing better at the shooter's ear, but it's louder than the other two silencers at the muzzle. So outside of the free field, that does have consequences. And it is very difficult to speak quantitatively about that without doing more math and more experiments. But I just want you to know, just keep it in the back of your mind for when you start to listen to these things when people shoot them. You go shoot them indoors, you hear late time reflections off of trees, things like that. It's going to make a difference, guys. It is. There's some other stuff in this you can look at this in the article in Figure 6. There's some other stuff too where you're getting like some pretty high shooter's ear suppression ratings, and then the muzzle ratings are getting really high too. Like the Flow 762, dude, that thing's nuts. I still look at that and I'm like, what? The Flow 762 is just really impressive. And then the Cat WB, that's another impressive one. What else? The Cat ODB. There's another one in here. Isn't there the Liberty Precision Machine? The torch is really good with the solid end cap, but to get its flow rate up, you got to vent it. And then, it gets 26 and 26, something like that. It's basically, isn't that funny? The torch with a vented end cap it's almost behaving like a Velos, but a little bit different. Not quite. Doesn't quite hit Velos numbers. And, that's interesting. We got a dealer feedback that said they agree. They're like, yep, the Velos is a little quieter than the vented torch. Oh, okay, interesting. It's interesting, right? When they're using, the dealers, not the manufacturers, but the dealers often shoot me straight. I'm not saying the manufacturers don't shoot me straight, but the dealers have a lot of stuff because they're trying to sell these things. Want to make sure they're equipping their Their customers are the best thing regardless of who makes it, right? They're trying to figure out what to get for the store so they can sell people stuff. So they want to understand it. So they're trying all the different ones, comparing them. So yeah, so I'm just looking at that, and I just wanted to say before I go on and talk specifically about something with the Velos construction, I do want to say, do pay attention to the combination of muzzle and ear. It's important. Okay. I think you'll find when you start tuning the weapons too, which a lot of you do anyway, I think you'll find that having the higher muzzle suppression rating is going to make you a little bit happier too. As you can imagine, right? You get that total suppression rating up. That's really great. Okay, so the one thing I'll just leave that with you. If you have questions about it, let me know. Now, I do want to talk about something that's really interesting, and I saw someone mention this, and maybe I didn't highlight it enough on the intro. This thing is 3D printed in the main section. It's in the main body. That's how they did the spiral annulus with the baffles, right? That's a good use of DMLS, right? Making something complicated like that you couldn't normally do with traditional machining. So yeah, that's smart. But the forward and aft sections of this thing are welded on, and they're just traditionally machined stuff. So for repair, they can just, cut those off and weld new ones without printing a new thing. And that's a really, really interesting thing to do. That's actually some really pretty good thinking. And if you have a manufacturing facility, which SilencerCo does, that's pretty smart. I've never been there, but yeah, they do a lot of stuff in house, and I think that's pretty forward thinking. These guys do move a lot of product. I think everyone knows that SilencerCo moves a lot of products, so that's pretty smart. Now, speaking about DMLS 3D printed silencers and repairs, I have heard. Do not think I know all the details about this, but I have heard that both Huxworks and CAT can also repair 3D printed stuff in different ways. But I will say it's interesting to see different companies doing it different ways. I like to see different approaches. It's cool to me. I just think it's going to be neat how all this stuff plays out in the future as manufacturing techniques do evolve. I think it's interesting to see how everyone's tackling it. I think it's interesting to see how everyone is taking advantage of it. Okay, it's really interesting to me. So, comparing this silencer to stuff, you look back at the old Saker review. I think it's cool to see the shooter's hazard getting so much better with the Velos over the Saker. I think it's cool it's doing so well that the only thing really beating this thing here at the shooter's ear, it's the CAT and the OSS stuff. It's OSS and CAT. They're the only ones beating this at the ear, right? I think. Go to the rankings table. I can't remember, but I think it's interesting to think about how this will do near surfaces compared to other stuff. I think it's interesting to compare new low back pressure designs with things that are more primitive and see the stark difference in signature. Okay, there's a stark difference in signature, and I think it's cool just to see how the whole pedigree is so vast now. Okay, it is really vast. And I think we're really gaining momentum here, guys. We are. The SilencerCo Velos, I think it's here to party. We're happy to have it in the pedigree for all of you. I think it's really cool. I hope you enjoyed this research. I hope you check it out, or I hope you will check it out. And I think maybe stay tuned for the 14.5 research with this thing. That'll come too, which will be cool to see. I think you're going to get a kick out of that too. Okay, so we're going to start to explore some other regimes. That'll be great. And the 14.5 host is not kind when it comes to back pressure, is it? So silencers like this, interesting to see what happens, right? It's cool, all right? So again, thanks to PEW Science Members for making this possible. You guys are awesome. So I'm looking at the time right now. I think we have time for topic 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do topic 2 at a time of 59 minutes and 51 seconds. Boom. Perfect. I think that's great. Okay, so and you know what? Speaking of thanking PEW Science members for making this possible, it does literally sometimes take a village to get this done. Not sometimes, all of the time. PEW Science is such a team effort. So Knight's Armament Silencer system. Knight's Armament Silencer system testing is in the works, and we got contributions from like four or five different people to make this happen, guys. It's the level of coordination to make this happen with like member contributions and like member gear and everything. It's so nuts, but it's also like so heartwarming. And 'tis the season to be thankful, and I'm just so thankful for you folks. So the two Knight's Armament silencers that were on loan, we had to send them back for the recall fix. Okay, it was the KAC 556 QDC-CRS PRT. So that's the full size 556 silencer with the ball bearing detent lock thing, and it's the PRT version. It's 3D printed. And there's also the 556 QDC MCQ-PRT, which is the little micro silencer that's like, it's just so small. I don't know. I bet it's going to be super loud. I have no idea. It's also the PRT version. I bet that's going to be so loud. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it'll like be a wonder silencer and everyone's going to want one. I have no idea, dude. I do have an idea, but I don't want to speak definitively. So there was those two silencers. We had to send them back. Knight's Armament issued a recall. Good on them. I think recalls, it's unfortunate when you have to do a recall for a product, like, when you buy a car and you have to take the car to a dealer and get like the exhaust manifold fixed or like the gas tank fixed or like the seatbelt fixed. Like that sucks. It takes time out of your day, but at least like, you're not driving around a car with like a defective seatbelt. So when I see a silencer company do a recall, I'm like, thank you for being a responsible manufacturer. I don't want a silencer coming off my gun, like, or blowing up and like hitting an object or hitting a person. How many stories have you heard? It's crazy. And I will tell you right now, guys, there are a lot of people who are like, who cares, man? It's just a silencer if it breaks. Yeah, cool story. Except, do you know that silencer companies have been sued because silencers have blown up and injured people? Like well-known silencer companies that you know. Oh, yeah, that's right. And did you know that publicly silencer designers that post on social media have told stories about silencers blowing off their gun and damaging property? Yeah. That's happened too. Like, this isn't speculation. This isn't hearsay. This is real. These are pressure vessels. These are dynamic pressure vessels on the end of a weapon, dude. So I don't know what was now, guys. I don't know everything that was fixed as part of this recall. I don't care. All I'm saying is that it's done, and good on Knights, because they found a problem and they wanted the user to have a corrected solution without having to gamble, and that's just really tip top. Okay, so we have in our possession those two silencers now, finally. We also have in our possession many 3-prong muzzle devices, and the picture I posted with this episode, I just put them all on the floor here. I took a picture of those two. We even have a MAMS brake. It's MAMS. So funny. We have that on loan from another member. We also have but wait, that's not all. We also have a 14.5-inch SR-15 Mod 2 upper from a member. That's a Knight's Armament upper, the complete upper. We also have from another member an SR-15 CQB Mod 2. That's that 11.5-inch. Okay. So we have all the parts and pieces for a really neat Knight's Armament test program for these two silencers. And it looks like all the variables will be explored if we do that. Now, I will say this, and please don't get upset at me, but I'm going to say it because I like to keep it real. After the first few Knight's Armament rifle tests we did with member funding, we learned something very interesting. We learned that Knight's Armament fans on the internet are very particular. And that's fine. I'm not sure why exactly. At first, I thought it was because maybe they were picky, because maybe they're in a different demographic or something. but suppressed small arms really do cover a wide range of folks, and it's not like Knight's armament silencers are out of reach. There are plenty of silencers out there that are just as exotic, really. And everyone from college kids to dads shooting with their kids, they seem to use them. So I don't know what it is. All I know is that if we do this, I want to be dang sure that all the Knight's armament fans are happy, because, hey, if this is for the public, there is no sense in doing it unless the public gets something out of it. So, all that being said, this is also a ton of work, a lot of money. This costs a lot of money to do. Whose money, you may ask? PEW Science's money from the members, guys. This is a lot of work. So at least part of this research program is going to be members only completely, to where like you can't even read it all. Read it if you're not a member. So what we might end up doing is that both the Mod 2 upper data sets might only be member articles. I don't know. That actually would probably be fair to members, I think, to do something like that, because this is insane. And the reason we would even test the Mod 2 uppers and not just the standard Mark 18 and the standard M4A1 mid-length gas 14.5 is actually for a couple of reasons. And it's not only because the Knight's armament fans want them, it's because the gas system's a little different, right? It's different in lengths, and it's different in the way it seals. Everything's just a little bit different. And that's a really interesting thing. And hey, it could be a cool data point for people too. And again, this also gives us an 11.5 data point, which is cool to have, right? And if it's not worth doing, you folks should definitely tell me. Because again, if you don't think I should do it, I won't do it. This is just for you. This is for you, okay? I mean, it's like whatever. Like I don't need like all this Knight's armament stuff. It's like a relax. Like it's like so, it's like I don't care that much about it, but like so many people seem to. So look, if you really want it, we'll do it. I just like, or we could just do it on the Mark 18, the 14.5, and be done. You know what I mean? And when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the test matrix. I don't really want to do other silencers at the same time on those two Knight's armament uppers due to the reduced utility, because like, oh, now it's tied to that weapon. No one can buy it except it's a Knight system. It's got the proprietary gas system and da-da-da. But that being said, it also would make sense to, while we're doing it, to maybe do the RC2. And then maybe if we had an RC3, maybe we do the, I'm not doing the RC2, but if we had an RC3, that would probably be one of the best test programs ever, right? To do the RC3 versus PRT systems on the Knight's Armament Mod 2 uppers. Wouldn't that be like gold? That would be gold, right? That would be like the thing to do, right? Wouldn't Knight's Armament people just go nuts for that? Wouldn't they? I don't know. Maybe we wait until we get an RC3. Then we just, you know what? We've waited this long. We have all this stuff. Just get an RC3, do it all. Just make it a knockdown, drag out, Surefire versus Knights gauntlet. And no one can claim foul because it's like, completely, neutral ground. PEW Science, right? Neutral ground. We don't have contracts with either of those companies. So no one should have any heartburn, right? It's completely like they're all just like looking at it just like you. Then no one can have any excuses for getting all mad. Okay? I don't know. We got to buy or borrow an RC3, beg, borrow, steal, whatever. Not steal, feds. Don't worry, ATF. I'm not going to steal a silencer. But yeah, anyway, your feedback is appreciated on this. Do let me know what you think we should do, okay? So I did want to give you this update because it's been so long, and now that we have everything together, I wanted to regroup. I wanted to re-examine the utility of the whole thing. When we first set out to do it, the RC3 wasn't even in the conversation, dude. So now that does get a little more interesting. Now that the RC3 is out and they're pushing it so hard in marketing, it does get a little more interesting, doesn't it? It does. Especially with our high flow rate discussions we've been having, doesn't it? It gets really interesting. The PRT, the RC3, they're both high flow rate. Very interesting. Would be cool. Okay. But again, no skin off our backs. This is for members. Worst case, we just do the Knights stuff. You get the Knights stuff. We move on. Forget about the Knights uppers. We just do the Mark 18 and 14.5. Done. Whatever. No skin off my back. I don't think you guys are really going to care that much. But hey, if you want to go big or go home, we can take advantage of the member loan stuff. One thing, I forgot to say. This grinds my gears. One thing that sucks, I need to remove the muzzle device from the CQB upper because the recall of those two silencers does not fix the issue of the locking collars hitting the rail. It hits the URX4 on the CQB upper because apparently those silencers were designed for Knights Armament's new rifle system with their new rail. The URX4 is just a little too long or something. So like I've been told the fix is you sand down the rail a little bit or you shim the muzzle device. I'm not sanding down that dude's URX4. I'm just not doing it. I'm gonna shim the muzzle devices just enough for it to clear the upper. That's the plan. There's a nightstick, which is I know this is getting super niche, but like this is super like deep Knights Armament stuff. But like, so Knights Armament, they're like super proprietary. The barrel extension in a Knight's gun is a little bit different. So like instead of using a reaction rod, there's like this special Knights Armament one called a nightstick to use in your vise to take the muzzle device off. So yet another PEW Science member has one of those. He's loaning to me. I haven't got that back yet either, or I haven't got that yet either. He's sending it. So that's like the fifth contribution or whatever to make this a reality. I got to become a Knights Armament armorer really quick. And I was thinking about sending the guy's upper off. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. Let me just learn how to do this. It'll be fine. And if I break it, I'll buy it. I don't care. Grassroots, baby. That's what we're going to do. So thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you found this podcast informative. I hope it answered your questions about the SilencerCo Velos LBP. It's a neat silencer. I would love your feedback on this Knights Armament rigmarole as well. Okay, so please, you can send the feedback in any form you like. YouTube, comment, email, smoke signal. Try to keep it civil and constructive. You can have fun in the YouTube comments, though, if you want. I don't care. I don't know how that works. It could be cool. Thank you again to PEW Science members for making literally everything we spoke about today possible. Just literally all member-driven. Crazy. A tremendous amount of work funded by you guys. You are the real MVPs. Okay? We'll be back next week with more stuff to speak about, as well as more data. There is more data coming next week. I can tell you that right now. It's going to be pretty nuts, actually, what's happening next week. So please, stay tuned until then, folks. I will talk to you folks again soon. All right, bye.